Alright, can we settle down? Okay, welcome to the second to the last lecture sponsored by Critica Cultura. For those who are unfamiliar with this group of academics, KK is an MLA indexed biannually online journal of literary and cultural and language studies. While the enumeration of these three academic areas may lead one to think that these fields of studies exist independently, any scholar in this room, your teacher, Ma'am Lulu, among others, would tell you otherwise. In one of the recent meetings of the Ateneo English Department, an assistant professor reminded the faculty that degree programs and other forms of academic exercise must be grounded on the fact that in this day of globalization, anything can be a text, and any text can be interrogated based on its textuality and intertextuality. Theory and criticism rest on the fact that a literary text can function not only as an artifact of an artist's brilliance, but a souvenir of trends, genealogies, and histories. Today we encounter yet another prominent scholar who adheres to this mode of interdisciplinarity by examining contemporary short stories and poetry and juxtaposing these to the historical experience that fall away from dominant state and social liberative narratives that would ultimately lead to a new and challenging interpretations of global trends. Professor Neferti Tadiar is a professor of women's studies and Barnard College and Director Center of the Critical Analysis of Social Difference at Columbia University. She was acting director, Barnard Center for Women's Studies. Her writing projects include, among others, discourses on empire living under the rule of permanent war, aesthetics affect, schooling democratic subjects. Her major singular author publications are Things Fall Away, Philippine Literatures, Historical Experience, and Tangential Makings of Globality. Okay. She has a long list of editorial and article publications in important international journals and critical anthologies. She is a member of the International Board of Editors of Critica Cultura. Again, the internationally peer-reviewed MLA Index biannual online journal of literary, cultural, and language studies published by the English Department. Please welcome Professor Tadiar.
Okay, are most of you students?
Yes.
Okay, so I wasn't sure who my audience was, and I was planning on reading from the introduction to my book. But now that I see all of you, I'm afraid that some of it might be a little dense. So I will just read and try to explain a few things along the way. It's a very long book that's coming out next year, and it's on Philippine literature and globalization. All right. In 1958, a young Nigerian author, Chinua Achebe, published his first novel, an important work in the movement of literary decolonization sweeping West Africa and more generally the Third World. This novel, Things Fall Apart, depicted the disastrous moment of colonization through the historical experience of the Igbo people. Achebe took his title from a poem by the Irish writer W.B. Yeats called The Second Coming, which decades earlier had depicted a modern world in turmoil and burdened by a sense of impending doom, to convey the sense of anarchy and drowned innocence that imbued the lives of his Igbo characters in the face of the historical destruction of their previous world. A sense of colonialism's apocalyptic destruction of the life worlds of entire peoples stoked the imaginations of anti-imperialist national liberation struggles all over the Third World. Entwined with this modern sensibility of violent chaos and catastrophic change was a prophetic will to freedom of new nations from the imposed destiny of their conquerors. I don't know if I can continue reading the whole introduction this way, so I'm going to just gloss. So I'm basically talking about the moment of decolonization, which Third World literature came to prominence because it was supposed to express and articulate the historical experiences of Third World peoples in their desire to attain sovereignty and liberation. Right now, 50 years later, we are in a moment of impending doom as well. In the 50s, it was a time of crisis but it was also a time of possibility for third world peoples. 50 years later, we are in another time of crisis, and this time, rather than the impending doom of the colonization, we have the impending doom of globalization. So now it is in the poem of W.B. Yeats. It is a messianic millennial capitalism that is slouching towards Bethlehem to be born. This has become now the gospel of salvation. Now, globalization appears to threaten with dissolution all the structures and relations of an older modern world, an apocalyptic vision that also bears promises of universal redemption. Now we witness the uncanny return, but also transmogrification of an older imperial, some would say totalitarian politics, and it would seem that the world has yielded the rough beast its hour come round at last. Now for the Philippines, we are in the midst of, and also at the edges of this maelstrom, right? Things are falling apart, as you probably can see in everyday life. In the face of modernization and globalization, we see the symptoms of this crisis, this falling apart, in the feminization of our labor, the worldwide movements of this labor and the export of our domestic labor, rapid urbanization and the rapid transformation of Metro Manila, but also other cities of the Philippines, and the explosion of a surplus floating population, which means the squatter population, the population of underemployed, unemployed, and people living as refugees from both counterinsurgency wars and from the war of poverty. So all of this seem to indicate that we are on the brink of permanent ruin. Crisis becomes common currency for understanding the conditions of contemporary Philippine life. My book is an attempt to think about what it is that we need now. In the moment of Achebe's book, Things Fall Apart, the insight of decolonization was that crisis was at the heart of the modern world. Crisis that was the result of colonialism, the result of rapacious capitalist accumulation on the part of first world countries, and it was the result of the division of the world into first and third worlds, and therefore the division of the values of people according to that, according to who was where. Right? So, since the deposing of Marcos in 1986, we are now in a condition of a permanent state of emergency in the Philippines. And it is built on the worsening economic, social, and political crisis from the late 60s to the early, to the present. From attempted military coups to murdered overseas domestic workers, from the crisis of the Philippine left to the crisis of the new Asian economy, from the kidnappings of Chinese Filipinos by para-police criminal networks, to the slayings and bombings in Mindanao by paramilitary criminal groups, each crisis claimed the basis of progressive as well as reactionary actions. Crisis launches both forces, liberatory social movements and state repression. So, in the meantime, as more and more resources are channeled into this crisis, the attempts to keep things together and hold on to familiar paths of becoming, more and more things fall away. This is why the title of my book is called Things Fall Away. More and more things fall away from the privileged and ever narrower worlds that remain. Refurbished as well as unreconstructed nationalisms and transnationalisms, battles for state power and civil liberties, identity-based claims to political and economic enfranchisement, liberal democratic ideals of civil society. These are the ways in which people are being led to seize agency in our times. But in the seizing of these familiar kinds of agency, what it takes to be, what it takes to have power, what it takes to be viable in this current world, what it takes to remain above the crisis, in those efforts, more and more things fall away, more and more lives, pasts, presents, futures, fall away, and these are lost to us, those of us who would like to seek different holds on a different future. So how are we in the face of this vanishing, right? So what I'm trying to describe is, in all this turmoil, many things are vanishing. Many things